Garden Report is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Hey, Barry Manning here. Welcome to a practice edition of the Garden Report. Celtics Knicks coming up tomorrow, the start of a new NBA season. Noah Dalzell alongside here. And interesting, I feel like newsworthy comments and visual from Joe Mazzulla here at practice today, talking to Nemesh Keita, Jordan Walsh, Baylor Scheierman, and alluding to conversations with many of the young players across the roster here about their roles going into this year. Here's what he had to say about those conversations with those guys today.
Yeah, listen, I was just telling them I know what it's like being them, because before I was fortunate to be in this position, I worked with a lot of the young guys. And there's nothing harder than being a young player with the Celtics, because we're trying to win championships and develop at the same time. And not many organizations are in both of those spaces. And so the young guys have to be very, very patient, because the roster is top heavy. And although you may think you're getting better, I think JD and Drew are in that situation. Like they've gotten better as players. But when you're in a situation of the Celtics organization, it can be hard to see the growth in that, right? And so you just kind of have to be patient in it. And so I was just telling them, like, hey, this is a situation that you're in. You know, it's going to get difficult because of that, you know, that impatience. But you just have to work through it. And I think Jordan's done a really good job of kind of going through that process as well. And you're kind of seeing the fruits of, like, his patience and his work ethic and what the staff does.
I'm gleaning from that. I don't know specifically who is going to be in what role to start this year, but it seems like across the board for the depth players, the younger players on this team, that there won't be minutes right away. That's what those kind of conversations, those kind of comments say to me. I've been hopeful that Jordan Walsh could carve out a role early, and he mentioned Walsh later in those comments as a guy who's persevered through this process that he's talking about. So maybe there is still some hope there, but if you're a Scheierman enthusiast, Keita, certainly Walsh, this isn't a great update from Joe on that front, that they're going to have roles here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do the math equation and conclude that ourselves, is that there's not really an opportunity for most of those guys. And he was asked about Baylor Scheierman and Anton Watson, and I mean, they're rookies, right? They were just drafted. I don't think there's any expectation, especially after what we saw in preseason, that either of those guys are going to have a sizable role early on here, or really any role. I would imagine they go right to main is my expectation, but we'll see. But I think what he was getting at, though, and the part of the comments that stood out to me the most was the fact that J.D. Davison and Drew Peterson are two guys that have improved a lot. And you saw that in preseason, and having watched them closely in Maine, they've improved a lot since they first joined, respectively, the organization. And the reality is that their situation might not change whatsoever. And that can be, I can't imagine how frustrating that is as a player. Like JD, this is his third two-way, and he's gotten better year after year, and he might go right to Maine and spend most of the year in Maine again. And so I think Joe was just thinking from a mental standpoint, like, I got to figure out a way to keep these guys engaged and to let them know that, acknowledge the fact that they're getting better, that they're working really hard, and that it might not actually yield the outcome that they want, and that's playing in a Celtics jersey in Boston. And it doesn't mean that they're not noticing the fact that they have grown, and their numbers were really good in preseason, and I think that's a reference to why.
I wonder how you do get those guys, and I asked that, said it's conversations, that it's those opportunities that come up one guy's route and resting and all that, and I get that. I feel like they've done a good job of integrating guys, especially last year, into those kind of roles, those kind of positions. But for Scheierman, for Walsh now, who seems like he's on the precipice, even guys like Peterson and Davison, as you mentioned there, they're going to really have an uphill battle to playing time here. But how do you get these guys involved to the point where they are ready? Because they just haven't had NBA opportunities yet at all across the board when you mention those five guys specifically.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is mental, and part of it is you just can't replicate it, right? Like if you're in Maine or you're sitting on the bench, like it's always going to be different, and there's always going to be a certain leap that you have to overcome when you're getting real NBA minutes. And I think everybody's in a different situation. You know, I think JD is the one that I think about the most, because 3 consecutive two-ways in Portland, and you know, it's such a grind to be in the G League, and he's signing up for it again. Like I think he's a guy you maybe have to go the extra mile with making sure that he's staying locked in, and then thinking about, like, is there ever an opportunity for him to come along for a road trip, even if he's not going to see the court. Like he didn't even really join the Boston team until the playoffs last year. Even Jordan had more of those opportunities, but it's hard. It's like you can say the right thing, you can motivate them. At the end of the day, this is a guy that for 3 years now has been dreaming and hoping towards a real NBA contract, and he might be closer, but I'm sure for him, until he actually gets it done, like there's going to be a level of frustration there, and I think that he's matured a lot too, from a mental standpoint. But I think it's a hard puzzle to solve.
For me, it's Walsh. I don't think we'll see him opening night, but could you see him against the Wizards? Can you find some minutes for him against the Pistons? I think that's the kind of thing you have to do with him. So that's where I'm actually going to be watching for this and where it goes early on this season. But we've seen with good teams, it is hard to get the younger players in there for those guys to gain the trust of the head coach. And I think that's been the case with Mazzulla, as it's been for many head coaches across this league. So not looking great for those guys in terms of roles early on, but as Mazzulla said, possibly later in the year and different opportunities that could happen. We are brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to Prize Picks, use code CLNS, get the free Anthony Edwards square right now. More than 0.5 points get you a win on his square, and all you need is 2 or more players, pick more or less on their stat projections, and you'll be a winner over there at Prize Picks. So go there, use that code CLNS, play a $5 lineup and get a $50 bonus right now, and go to Game Time. Opening night tickets still available over there, but Celtics tickets all year available, and sometimes the greatest price is right up to and even a little bit after game time over there. So use the code CLNS, you get $20 off on top of that on your first time purchase, and terms apply over there, of course. Game Time, CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. For Noah Dalzell, I'm Bobby Manning. We'll have coverage of Celtics Knicks, the opening night game before, during, and after here on the Garden Report on CLNS Media and Celtics All Access. But for now, there's been a practice edition of the Garden Report.